Hi, this is Megan with Beadaholique, and today I'm going to show you some different ways of finishing off loom bead weaving. So when you pull your piece off of the loom, you have your warp threads running along that will be nice and long and loose, and you'll need to find some way to finish those off. It is possible, especially with a narrower piece, to just tie your threads, bring them to the back, and weave them in. If you have a wider piece, you start to have an awful lot of threads to weave into the top few rows of beads, and especially if your beads are smaller, it might not work. I personally like to put bead loom weaving on a backing. So I'm just going to show you a couple different ways that I've experimented with and found. And one of them is to sew your weaving onto a fabric or leather, and the other one is to glue your weaving into a bezel. But either way, the first thing that you need to do is tie off the threads. So you're gonna take your threads into little pairs of 2, and I've already done this on the other ones here. I'm just going to show you on the last one. Take your 2 threads and you're going to just tie an overhand knot. Go ahead and loop it around, and then before you pull it tight, take a needle and put the needle in the knot close to the bead weaving. If you've ever done purl knotting, this is very similar to what you do with the tweezers and purl knotting. It's going to, as you pull, keep the knot close to the beads. And then just slide the needle out. So once your threads are nice and knotted, then you can trim them down. And you don't want to cut them too short. Just give them about 1 inch, maybe a little bit less, to get nice and securely tucked in underneath there. So as you can see on this choker here, I've taken this piece of loom weaving and sewn it onto a piece of ribbon and turned that into a choker. And I'm going to show you real quick just how you sew that down. You can use ribbon, you can use ultra suede, you can use any kind of canvas or fabric. So it's really up to you with what kind of look you're going for. Just cut your backing to the same size and shape. If you want to do something like this where it extends past the ends, make sure you plan ahead before you cut. And then I'm going to take just some nylon beading thread on a beading needle, and I'm going to tie a knot in the end. I'm just going to do a regular sewing knot. If you don't know how to do a sewing knot by rolling off your finger, all you need to do is make a knot and go through several times. It's a surgeon's knot. And then pull tight. And if your knot's not large enough to keep it from going through the fabric, then just make another one right on top of it. And then go from the corner here, inside a little bit, you're just going to go out to the edge. And you want to be just below the corner, right where your first row of beads is going to sit. Take your beaded piece, tuck the knots to the back side. And then you're going to line that up on your backing fabric, or backing material. And then you can see your threads coming out right next to that hole there. Just go all the way through the first row. And then just take a little stitch at the edge of your backing material and loop it from the bottom up so that it grabs that material. Now go through a bead and then go from the bottom up through your backing material and make sure that you have your needle coming to the inside of the threads that are running through there so that it'll hold it down. Pull that tight and make sure that the thread sits between the beads. And then you're going to go to the next bead over. And you're going to continue this way. So from the bottom up through, and make sure it's on the other side of the threads that run through there. And then through the bead. And keep going until you get to the end. And then once you get to one of the sides, you're going to make sure that your threads underneath are tucked nicely in. And you're just going to do a whip stitch, which is just around in a spiral, catching both pieces in each stitch. What you want to do is go from the bottom up through your backing material and then catch the thread bridge that's between the two beads on the end. And back around from the bottom up between the next two beads and catch that thread at the end. And you're just going to continue down the length of your piece. And make sure that your threads stay tucked in as you work so they don't stick out. And that's going to give you a nice secure foundation. And you can see the back is very neat. It's just going to have tiny little stitches showing. When you get down to the bottom, you're going to secure this end the same way you did this end, turn the corner and go all the way down. And if you need to add more thread as you go, you can tie off in the beads and weave in your ends just like you would do during bead weaving. And that's going to be how you would sew this onto a backing, like in this kind of a use. And one of the other ways I want to show you is how to glue it into a bezel, which is really quick and easy. First thing you're going to do is take some E6000 on a toothpick or a scrap piece of wire, some kind of applicator. If you have the E6000 with a fine tip, you can just do it straight from the bottle, the tube. And just spread a thin layer on the back side of your piece if you have a front side and a back side that you prefer. Make sure you get this on the back. And then you're going to take your loose threads and fold them to the back. And you're going to get some glue on your fingers at this point, so just be careful that you don't also get the glue on the front of your beading. And try to make sure that you get your threads all the way around so that the knots don't show from the front. And you don't want this to be too gloopy. Don't use too much glue or else it won't lay flat. And you can also use your applicator to get those down into the glue. Okay, once you have those glued down, you don't need to let them dry all the way because we're gonna put more glue onto our bezel and just glue it down now. Now the tricky part about this is that you want to get glue into all the corners and the edges of the bezel pretty quickly before it starts to dry. So be thorough, but be quick. And you want to give yourself a pretty generous layer. You don't want so much that the glue seeps right through the beads, but you want to make sure that the glue is going to get up into all the beads. So all the way into the corner, all the way to the edges. And then you're going to take your piece and glue it down and make sure that the knots are tucked in. I'm just using the back of the wire that I used for the applicator for that. And then you're going to just let that glue dry nice and thoroughly, making sure that all the beads on the edges and the corners are tucked in, or pushed down. So that's another way that you can finish your loom weaving. And you can experiment and come up with all different kinds of ways to do your own finish on it. You could string the warp threads into some beaded tassels, or just tie them together. If you want to make a loop, you can kind of play around, but there's a couple of ideas for what I like to do when I'm finishing loom work.